made it successfully back. I don't know about you all, but somehow that reminds me of the Star Trek thing where they transport you and, you know, all of a sudden you appear somewhere else. It looks like hopefully everybody transported in whole body, and we got everybody back. Let's just wrap up our meeting today with a sense from each of the breakout rooms of some of the highlights from your conversations on the 3 questions that we had. Thanks, Morris. So let's just go around. I don't know who, our group chose a representative to speak. Hopefully the rest of you did. So for breakout room 1, who is our reporter? And just, you know, again, a couple of minutes, 2 to 3 minutes on highlights of your conversation. So who do we have reporting? Volunteer from group 1?
Hey Lou, I found in the past that you don't always know what group you're in when you go into the breakout.
Okay.
I think I'm group 5, but I really don't remember the number.
All right, well, we'll get to everybody anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Rick, as long as you're speaking up, are you the reporter from that group?
I guess I am, yes.
All right, well, give us your highlights, please.
Okay. The group consisted of me and Jess Brown and Emily and Scott.
Okay.
And in terms of the goals that hikers have in using trails, we agreed that big views and shade are important. And also in busy places like Mission Peak, arriving early so you can get a little more serenity than having to face the crowds that come out in the middle of the day. We also, all of us, I think, felt that there are really 2 different types of hikers. There are solo hikers who want to go out, single track, serenity, enjoy the day, get away from crowds. And there are family groups and others who probably prefer wider trails and going as a group. On the second question, issues that hikers experience, the capacity of the trails, the user density, particularly during these times, is a challenge. Also, access to restrooms, water, etc. A challenge that we identified is weekend hikers, people who are there all the time, pick up the dog poop and pick up the garbage and obey trail etiquette, but some of the weekend hikers don't, and that's a challenge. And finally, with regard to the third item, what would improve trail users' experience? We had several ideas. With regard to trail etiquette, we felt like it might be helpful to improve signage on the trails to stress etiquette, because of people who walk on the wrong side of the trail or don't ring their bell or don't pick up their dog poop or whatever. And so some improved signage might help in that regard. We also talked about ways to get bicyclists further out from trailheads, because the crowds are really closer to the trailheads in general. That's where most of the hikers are. And so the idea of having perhaps a short, a medium, and a long loop from a location to encourage bicyclists to go on the long loop and hikers to go on the shorter or medium loop would be helpful. I think that's the key points that we covered. I'm sure the other 3 people might want to jump in and add to what I said. One final point that came up was a question just in general of how we as this group can help Sean to get more traction to build more than 13 miles of trails in the next 10 years.
All right, Sean, we'll ask for your advocacy recommendations later. All right, thank you, Rick, for that perfect summary in terms of length of time. That's great. Let's move on to our next reporter. Anybody, since we don't know our numbers, anybody want to just, yeah, Amelia, is that you? You raising your hand? Okay, tell us who was in your group.
Yes, I'm from Breakout Group 3, and we had Kathy Roth representing dog walking recreation. We had Pam Young from Audubon Society and Helen Burke from STEP. And by the luck of the draw, we were an all-female group. As to question one, our goals, we want to encourage an open discussion with the other user groups and make it clear that we respect all the different forms of recreation and want to work harmoniously together to meet everybody's goals. And we also find it central that environmental protection is a part of all these recreation considerations, that and environmental stewardship. As regards our issues, there are two qualities of issues here. The first is that at least two of us have been blown off the trails by mountain bikers when we were hiking, and we had to like leap for our lives as they came speeding by with varying degrees of hostility. The second quality is of concern is destruction of the environment by creation of bootleg trails, compaction of soil, damage to the roots of trees, and other kinds of unthinking things that go on. The mitigations that we're looking for, or this possible solutions, are like our friends have said, improved signage. And perhaps there should be a code of ethics that each user group would promulgate amongst the others of that affinity, where we would talk about what we could do to better respect other groups and to get better respect in turn. Pam pointed out that signing a code of ethics has been proven to be an effective way of improving people's trail behavior. As regards the incipient e-bike legalization, I suggest that there be some sort of permitting process and an education process like the DMV requires for motor vehicle operation. It was also noted that bicycle speeding on trails, even the human-powered kind, is vehicular access, and it's a thing that the existing trails were not prepared for. So I think those are the main points. Does anybody in the group want to add anything? Okay.
Well, I actually, this is Kathy Roth. I actually would add that I think that there's a genuine need for recreation, that there's a genuine need for people who want to ride their bicycles. It's hugely popular. And I personally actually think there should be a place where they can go fast. It probably shouldn't be in the same places where there are horses. But you know, somehow we all need to accommodate each other on these things.
Crockett Hills. If they can go fast at Crockett Hills.
Crockett Hills.
Okay, thank you, Amelia and Group 3. All right, next, I know our group had, Group 2 had Austin.
Sure, happy to report out. So our group was myself, obviously, Gary, Norman, and Antoine and Gabriella from Civic Corps, and Luana. And let's see, anything that's unique here, a couple from question one, what are some of the goals? Solitude and enjoyment with nature was definitely stressed and shared by everyone, you know, sort of getting out of the urban experience and getting into nature so that you could see wildlife and see natural habitats. Also some desires for physical exercise and sometimes strenuous physical exercise with some climbing and elevation change. Also from the younger participants looking for some, you know, Instagram moments or sort of social media, pictures. And then really just a solitude, really, to get out and be able to hear the birds and sort of think about things in a different way that's than being in the urban built space. Finding good views is part of that as well. So some of the issues that hikers experiencing and or creating, And there was a number of them from crowding. That was heard really clearly by everyone. Some of the etiquette, just trail sharing etiquette, not only between hikers and other user groups, but hikers themselves, from using earbuds and sort of walking in the middle of the trail and not being aware to what's going on around them. And some of this may be quite a few newer trail users or people that haven't been out there as much as others, so they're learning. And sometimes that learning can be sort of startling. A lack of sort of open facilities, and this has been obviously very true during COVID. So there aren't water fountains, and a lot of people don't really know where to get water when they get out on the trail or where to go to the bathroom appropriately. And sadly, in some cases, some people that have been intimidated or threatened, or one story of someone being sort of flashed, exposed by someone else and not knowing how to report that because there was no, staff at the park and not knowing how to or what phone number to call besides 911. So some of that were some of the problems. Poison oak on some trails, the extent of it, the number of abandoned bags of dog poop in certain areas is pretty off-putting and troubling. So those or was a lack of signage is the last thing. Some, and some of the maps being sort of, a lot of the park district maps are shown in isolation, and they show trails that just sort of dead end and then there's white space, but we know that there's East Bay Mud or there may be another park, but it's not shown. And so there's a lack of connectivity with the adjacent lands. Moving on, sort of what could we do to improve the trail user experience? So obviously knowing where some of these resources are, so some kind of maps that are easier to read and maybe available on smartphones, having more staff being physically present or knowing how to contact people if you're in a tough spot. The desire to have cyclists all use bells and use them properly. And so that would help in calling out. And then a big part of the problems is really just because everyone's trying to share the same trails. So how do we disperse usage by either creating more trail opportunities, building new trails where it's appropriate, and then also educating the current users about the trails that may exist, but they just don't even know they're there and how to get to them. And sort of trying to get people off of all the big main feeder fire roads would be very helpful. So that's what I've captured. Did anyone from our group want to add in? Did I miss anything? Okay, thanks. Back to you, Lou.
All right, on to the next. Who's our next reporter?
I was the reporter for Group 4. I'll just take a minute. So our group was Mimi and Ian and Linus. And one of the goals from our group was the idea of gearing trails with older populations in mind, recognizing that wider trails are good for socializing, people talking side by side. And there's a recognition that safety is a priority for users, but certainly older users. And that there is a recognition that not everyone is a hiker. Some people just want an easy walk out and back and see outside the trail.
Devin, you're breaking up again.
Okay. I think I will just, I'll put my notes down in the Google Docs. Sorry, folks.
All right, let's go on to our next reporter. I think we have 2 more to go. So
I'll go ahead for our group.
Okay.
I was in with Mary Barnsdale, Joseph, I'm going to butcher your last name, was on, and Michael Gregory. And so we had a lot of, I guess, similar comments here. And a lot of it was focused on creating a culture of civility on the trails. And there was discussion of actually developing sort of a similar campaign, similar to what's been done with the poop fairy, but sort of a campaign of sharing the parks. There was some discussion about, definitely needing to do better understand who is actually using the parks and perhaps using technology to kind of track who our park users are. And then also some discussion about what's been done elsewhere with regards to maybe alternating days, having cyclists able to use a trail on a certain day or maybe a certain period of time during the day versus hikers on other days, exploring those types of things. One thing that I've heard, I think pretty consistently, is improved signage. So there was, a focus on education and getting folks all on the same page on how to use the parks, and then and better understanding how to actually report rule violations, so that those things can be followed up on. So I think that those were the big things. Anybody else can feel free to jump in, but that's kind of the takeaways that I got down on my notes.
Okay. I just got a message from Kim that she's also having some audio issues. And
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, a little bit. You're a little faint. You can give it a try.
Okay, I'll give it a try real quick.
Good.
So I was in a group with Morse, Jim, Simone, and Bonnie. And some of the goals that we talked about was getting exercise, forest bathing, getting the mental and physical health, being able to admire beauty and nature, being able to relieve stress when we're out on the trails and appreciate plants and animals and all around wildlife. Bonnie also mentioned the social aspect, being able to socialize others in doing all of these activities, and also conducting research while she's on the trails of the types of trails for accessibility. In terms of the issues experienced, we definitely hit upon all the COVID-related issues of trail etiquette from users not wearing masks or social distancing. But there's also issues with maintenance of amenities because of the overuse of parks during this time, and even before then, lack of access to restrooms that are usable, that are accessible, because porta potties aren't always accessible. Overflow at the trailhead parking. And we've also reiterated other points made in other breakout groups of having maps that show updates on trails, even if they're not park district trails, if it goes into, say, local state parks or other trails. And then issues with informal trails or social trails. And then people who may have different physical disabilities, having the transportation to these trails to begin their experience. Lack of access to the majority of the land, and lack of park info on the website regarding accessibility. And then we've also mentioned etiquette regarding horse poop, dog poop, all around trail maintenance, and also the issues with connectivity, being able to follow signage along the trails and wayfinding. And in terms of creative solutions that we've thought of, we've mentioned using apps on our phones that could guide us outer spatial all trails. In terms of improving signage, we did like the idea of listing distance on the signs. Someone mentioned kind of having something similar to freeway signs where you say the next bench or rest stop will be in mile, or showing park benches on the park maps. Some of the complex issues of the park district is around accessibility, but also need to get into user conflict issues. And we talked about doing a fact-finding segment, not just having individual user groups, but also being able to address the assumptions so that we're all on the same page and being able to address some of these issues. Let's see here. And if I've missed anything, anyone in my group, please feel free to chime in.
I think maybe just to clarify that last point, it just seems that still, you know, in the sidebar and other conversations and tone that some, you know, user conflict is one of the primary issues of why this group is together, and some fact finding with all of us getting on board with the resources beforehand, I think would be really beneficial, especially given that the next week is bicyclists, and clearly based on discussion, this one maybe, or not next week, but next session. Just something to note in design of the next meeting.
Great, yeah. Thanks, Simone. And we received a couple of ideas, suggestions for how to best communicate and prepare for our next conversation. But I just want to take a moment at 12:56 to note that we've covered a lot of ground today, and really appreciate everybody sticking around for this, you know, another 3-hour Zoom meeting. Our intention is to eventually get us down to two-hour meeting and make those, you know, really discussion oriented and less about framing, you know, process, so to speak. So with that in mind, just to wrap up, one of the things that we thought would be a really good standing agenda item is to offer, you know, one, a preview of what's coming next. And then secondly, an opportunity, since this is, we've got a lot of different networks and groups represented here, is just any announcements that from the membership here of important events or things coming up that your group is doing, or that you'd like everybody to know about. So I don't want to, you know, prolong this too much, but if you have something that you think this group would benefit from knowing about that's going on, this is an opportunity to have a member announcement kind of fun. So with that, anybody have something they'd like to announce to the group? Something coming up? Yeah, Norman, go ahead.
Not really that. If for the bicycle meeting, is there going to be a discussion at that one about e-bikes, or is that going to be a separate discussion? And secondly, I really would ask the Park District to put together some kind of memorandum for us on what are the legal ramifications for e-bikes in parks.
Okay, great.
That sounds good.
All right.
One thing I was going to mention is I saw that something that came up in the chat, and I thought it was a good suggestion. Gary mentioned putting together some sort of a discussion board or something like that. I mean, obviously there is a lot to talk about, and I think if we can use the time between meetings to continue this discussion going, and Norman, your point as well, as far as getting information out about e-bikes and that sort of thing, we'll explore opportunities to do that sort of thing so that we can kind of use the time in between meetings. So, you know, once we get here, not everything has to happen in this Zoom meeting sort of thing.
Brian, may I ask you a question? You allow hiking in the parks now, don't you?
Oh, absolutely.
And is there a group size? Is there a maximum group size that you allow?
I don't think so. I don't think there's a maximum agreement amount on
because
group hikes.
we control our own size. We as a club control the size of the group to be no more than 20.
Yeah, this is actually an issue that I cut out of my remarks in doing the East Bay Hills Trails Benefit hike over the years. I discovered that you're actually supposed to get a permit if you have a group larger than 30. And none of the hiking groups actually do that. But I was told that anytime you have more than 30, you're supposed to get a special events permit. And for hikers, you know, if there's like a race going on, okay, that makes sense. But for hikers, it makes absolutely no sense in my view. And so that is a question that the Park District should look at.
Great. Okay, well, it looks like we're right at 1 o'clock. Devin or Brian or Sean, anything? I'm going to express my appreciation. Maria's been taking great notes on the mural board, and you'll be seeing those along with notes from today's session. Devin, back to you.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, everyone, for this really enlightening meeting that we had and this robust discussion, the beginning of many more. So,
Thank you.
Brian, any last words?
No, I just, same thing, want to express my appreciation. And I know this meeting was a little bit messier than the first one. I think that's the nature of it. This is a large group. And so we'll work on tightening up the agenda. Like I say, figuring out how we can kind of keep the dialogue going outside of the group. I want to thank Sean for his presentation, because I know he's been just really wanting to get that information out for a while to kind of, you know, share what his world is. And I think he did a really good job at that. And so, and I encourage anybody to, you know, reach out to any of us. We would like, you know, keep the dialogue going. And if we can provide any information or updates on, you know, various projects, that would be helpful. So,
Brian,
yeah.
Brian, this is Ian. I just want to say that as a club, we think it's a privilege to be able to hike in your parks. So the trails, the way they're maintained, we just feel it's a privilege to be able to hike where we hike in your parks. So thank you.
Well, thanks for that, Ian. And I'll just say, you know, these are public spaces. You know, we all have a responsibility to steward them, to work together on them. You know, parks are the most democratic spaces that we have. And, you know, right now, democracy is really, really important. So, so I'm glad that we're all able to, you know, respectfully get together and have these conversations and hopefully move forward. Let's hope that we see that at all levels of government. So,
because you're
thanks,
in
everybody.
charge of the largest park district system in the country. Aren't you the largest in the country?
Regional park district. We like to say that we're the largest, but there's some qualifiers in there as well. But thanks, everybody. We couldn't do it without all of you. So appreciate it, and have a great weekend. Enjoy.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.